Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Padagamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Chagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadhaitam Savadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagamrita Shivashakhan Vitam Chanamam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swamrita Namane Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamrita Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Picharane Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Dishtarani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavranda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Narsimhaya Namaste Tejase Avirbhava Vajrana Kavachya Damshtra Kamyashayam Randhaya Randhaya Tamo Grisa Grisa Om Swaha Abhayam Abhayam Atmani Bhuvishta Om Shrom Yadidas Sime Kaman Varamsta Varadarshava Kamanam Hridaya Sambhram Bhavatastu Vrinevaram Evam Janam Nipatitam Prabha Kupe Kama Bhikam Maniyah Prapadam Prasangat Kritmatma Sat Sarashina Bhagavan Gita Swam Kritam Cheta Bhritya Seva Hare Krishna. Very sorry for the delay, and so without any delay we will start. So we are reading from the book Brahmacharya and Krsna Consciousness, written by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj, dedicated to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, published by Bhakti Vikas Trust. So I would like to request Rakesh Rupananda Prabhu to read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Pranam Prabhuji. Am I audible Prabhuji?
Little bit more sound, bro.
Okay,
Little bit louder. You can be little bit louder.
हाँ पंखा वो कर देना.
हाँ जी.
प्रभु जी ये स्टार्ट से पढ़ना है?
हाँ मतलब पहले से पढ़ सकते हैं. Quotes from other books.
जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, गुरु महाराज की जय. Maddened by the fire, rushes blindly into its flame. A foolish person with no.
कहाँ से पढ़ रहे हैं आप?
वो पेज 183 आ गया था प्रभु जी, आप पहले अपने आप.
हाँ 183 में quotes from other books by.
अच्छा
Sheila
नीचे से.
हाँ जी. थोड़ा आपका आवाज कम.
मैं फोन को पास ले आता हूँ प्रभु जी. अब ठीक
आपके
है
पास
प्रभु जी?
आपके पास हेडफोन नहीं है?
नहीं प्रभु जी, हेडफोन वो खराब है, बल्कि उससे कम आवाज आती है, मैंने देखा है.
ठीक है पढ़िए.
Quotes from other books by Srila Prabhupada. The cult of Bhakti Yoga is so powerful that one automatically loses sexual attraction. Being engaged in the superior service of the Lord. Bhagavad-Gita 6.13 and 14. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore a pure brahmachari engages fully in Harer Nam Anukirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibrations of other sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental sound of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Bhagavad-Gita 4.26. That happiness which is derived from contact of all senses with their objects, and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. A young man and a young woman meet, and the sense drives the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing to the senses, but at the end or after some time, it becomes just like poison. They are separated, or there is divorce, there is lamentation, there is sorrow, etc. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses, and the sense object is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. Bhagavad-Gita 18.38, text and purport. Lust and love have different characteristics, just as iron and gold have different natures. One should try to discriminate between sexual love and pure love, for they, are, for they belong to different categories with a gulf of difference between them. They are as different from one another as iron is from gold. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 4.164, text and purport. The desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust, but the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prem, love. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita asserts with authority that sexual love is a matter of personal sense enjoyment. All the regulative principle in the Vedas pertaining to desires for fatherhood, wealth, and so on are different phases of sense gratification. Acts of sense gratification may be performed under the cover of public welfare, nationalism, religion, altruism, ethical code, biblical code, health directives, fruitive action, bashfulness, tolerance, personal comfort, liberation from material bondage, progress, family affection, or fear of social ostracism, or legal punishment. But all these categories are different subdivisions of one substance, sense gratification. All such good acts are performed basically for one's own sense gratification. For no one can sacrifice his personal interest while discharging these much advertised moral and religious principles. But above all, this is a transcendental stage in which one feels himself to be only an eternal servitor of Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead. All acts performed in this sense of servitudes are called pure love of God because they are performed for the absolute sense gratification of Krishna, Shri Krishna. However, any act performed for the purpose of enjoying its food or results is an act of sense gratification. Such actions are visible sometime in gross and sometimes in subtle forms. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 4.165 verse. Text and purport. Sometimes jealous persons criticize the Krishna conscious movement because it engages equally both boys and girls in distributing love of Godhead, not knowing that boys and girls in countries like Europe mix very freely. These fools and rascals criticize the boys and girls in Krishna consciousness for intermingling. But these rascals should consider that one cannot suddenly change a community's social custom. However, since both the boys and girls are being trained to become preachers, those
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Rupananda Prabhu. I don't know what had happened. Okay, I will continue. Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी ये एक्चुअल में वो शॉर्ट हो गया था प्रभु जी
हाँ,
कनेक्शन लूज होने के कारण वो जो है फोन वो छोटा हो जाता है बीच
नो
मैं
प्रॉब्लम.
इसको
आप वो पैराग्राफ्स के आगे से पढ़िए. समटाइम्स जेलस पीपल क्रिटिसाइज.
एक मिनट and have some there since the year यहाँ पे है Less intelligent Krishna, they mingling. I'm just kidding. You have
Sometimes jealous people criticize the Krishna conscious movement.
Sometimes jealous person criticize the Krishna conscious movement because it engages equally both boys and girls in distributing love of Godhead. Not knowing that boys and girls in countries like Europe mix very freely, those fools and rascals criticize the boys and girls in Krishna consciousness for intermingling. But these rascals should consider that one cannot suddenly change a community's social customs. However, since both the boys and girls are being trained to become preachers, these girls are not ordinary girls, but are as good as their brothers who are preaching Krishna consciousness. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 7.31 and 32. Since the European and American boys and girls in our Krishna consciousness movement preach together, less intelligent men criticize that they are mingling without restriction. In Europe and America, boys and girls mingle unrestrictedly and have equal rights. Therefore, it is not possible to completely separate the men from women. However, we are thoroughly instructing both men and women how to preach. And actually, they are preaching wonderfully. Of course, we very strictly prohibit illicit sex. Boys and girls who are not married are not allowed to sleep together or live together, and there are separate arrangements for boys and girls in every temple. Grihasthas live outside the temple, or in the temple we do not allow even husband and wife to live together. The result of this are wonderful. Both men and women are preaching the gospel of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Krishna with redoubled strength. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 7.38. A devotee's most formidable enemies is association with women in an enjoying spirit. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela 22 Introduction. Marriage is a concession for people who are unable to control their senses. Generally, a person cannot make such advancement in spiritual consciousness if he is married. He becomes attached to his family and is prone to sense gratification. Thus, his spiritual advancement is very slow or almost nil. Chaitanya Charitamrita Ante Leela 13.112. It is a fact that we are constantly being kicked by Maya, just as the male ass is kicked in the face by the she ass when he comes for sex. Similarly, cats and dogs are always fighting and whining when they have sex. These are the tricks of nature. Even an elephant is in the jungle is caught by the use of a trained she elephant who leads him into a pit. Maya has many activities, and in this material world, her strongest shackle is the female. Of course, in actuality, we are neither male nor female, for these designations refer only to the outer dress, the body. We are actually Krishna's servant. In conditioned life, however, we are shackled by the iron chains, which takes the form of beautiful women. Thus, every male is bound by sex life, and therefore, when one attempts to gain liberation from the material clutches, he must first learn to control the sex urge. Teaching of Lord Chaitanya, Introduction. The demands of the body can be divided into three categories: the demands of the tongue, the belly, and the genitals. One may observe that these three senses are physically situated in a straight line as far as the body is concerned, and that the bodily demands begin with the tongue. If one can restrain the demand of the tongue by limiting its activity to the eating of prasada, the urges of the belly and the genital can automatically be controlled. Nature of ये कौन सी बुक है प्रभु जी? NOI
Nectar of Instruction.
Nectar of Instruction. Text 1 purport. As far as the urges of the genitals are concerned, there are two proper and improper, or legal and illicit sex. When a man is properly mature, he can marry according to the rules and
regulations.
rules and regulations of the Shastras, and use his genitals for begetting nice children. That is illegal and religious. Otherwise, we may adopt many artificial means to satisfy the demands of the genitals, and he may not use any restraint. When one indulges in illicit sex, as defined by the Shastras, either by thinking, planning, talking about, or actually having sexual intercourse, or by satisfying the genitals by artificial means, he is caught in the clutches of Maya. These instructions applies not only to householders, but also to Tyagis, or those who are in the renounced order of life. In his book Prem Vivarta, chapter 7, Sri Jagdananda Pandita says,
Vaira,
वैरागी भाई
Vairagi
वैरागी भाई ग्राम्य कथा न सुनिबे काने ग्राम्य व्रता न कहिबे यबे मिलिबे आने स्वप्नेओ न करह भाई स्त्री संभाषणा गृहे स्त्री छाड़िया भाई आसिया छ वना यदि चाह प्रणय राखिते गौरांगेर सने छोटा हरिदासेर कथा थाके ये न मने भला न खाइबे और भला न पैरिबे हृदय ते राधा कृष्ण सर्वदा सेविबे. My dear brother, you are in the renounced order of life and should not listen or talk about ordinary worldly things, nor should you talk about worldly things when you meet with others. Do not think of a woman even in dreams. You have accepted the renounced order of life with a vow that forbids you to associate with women. If you wish to associate with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you must always remember the incident of Chota Haridas and how he was rejected by the Lord. Do not eat luxurious dishes or dress in fine garments, but always remain humble and serve their Lordship Sri Radha Krishna in your hearts of heart. Nectar of Instruction, Text 1, purport. If there is some disease in the body which is neglected, it becomes incurable. Similarly, when one is not careful about restraining the senses and lets them loose, it is very difficult to control them at all. Krishna, chapter 4, Krishna book, chapter 4. The perfection of human life is based on knowledge and renunciation. But it is very difficult to attempt to reach the stage of knowledge and renunciation while in family life. Krishna book, chapter 87.
ठीक है प्रभु, किसी और डिवोटी को बोलता हूँ पढ़ने के लिए. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद प्रभु जी.
हरे कृष्णा, हरे कृष्णा. Okay, Vivek, can you read? Bhakta Vivek.
Yeah. There are 4 types of brahmacharya. Is it audible, bro?
Yes.
There are 4 types of brahmacharis. The first is called Savitra, which refers to a brahmachari who, after initiation and the sacred thread ceremony, must observe at least 3 days of celibacy. The next is called Prajapatya. Prajapatya, which refers to a brahmachari who strictly observes celibacy for at least 1 year after initiation. The next is called Brahmachari, which refers to a brahmachari who observes celibacy from the time of initiation up to the time of the completion of his study of Vedic literature. The next stage is called Naishtika, which refers to a brahmachari who is celibate throughout his whole life. Out of these, the first 3 are Upakurvana, which means that the brahmachari can marry later after the brahmachari period is over. The Naishtika brahmachari, however, is completely reluctant to have any sex life. Therefore, the Kumaras and Narada are known as Naishtika brahmacharis. Such brahmacharis are called Veeravrata because their vow of celibacy is as heroic as the vows of the Kshatriyas. The brahmachari system of the life is especially advantageous in that it increases the power of memory and determination. It is specifically mentioned in this connection that because Narada was a Naistika brahmachari, he could remember whatever he heard from his spiritual master and would never forget it. One who can remember everything perpetually is called Shrutidhara. A Shrutidhara, a Shrutidhara, a Shrutidhara brahmachari can repeat verbatim all that he has heard, without notes and without reference to books. The great sage Narada has this qualification, and therefore, having taken instructions from Narayana Rishi, he is engaged in propagating the philosophy of devotional service all over the world. Krsna Chapter 87. In the rainy season, when the rivers swell and rush to the ocean, and as the wind blows the waves about, the ocean appears to be agitated. Similarly, if a person engaged in the mystic yoga process is not very advanced in spiritual life, he can be affected by the modes of nature and thus will be agitated by the sex impulse. A person fixed in spiritual knowledge will not be attracted by the allurement of material nature in the form of beautiful women and the sex pleasure enjoyed in their association. One, however, who is still immature in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge may be attracted at any moment by the illusion of temporary happiness, just as the ocean is agitated by the rushing rivers and blowing wind which occur during the rainy season. It is therefore very important to fix oneself at the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master who is a representative of God so that one will not be carried away by sex agitation. Hello, Prabhu.
Yeah. Light of Bhagavat.
Yeah, Light of Bhagavat, 17th text and purport. The dark well of householder life kills the soul. Light of Bhagavat, text 17, purport. A student education should begin with Brahmacharya, which means freedom from sexual attachment. If he can, he should try to avoid all this nonsense. If not, he can marry. Teachings of Queen Kunti. First of all, one must be trained in Brahmachari system and learn how to deny the senses. A Brahmachari should be trained in tapasya, not in enjoyment. Formerly, Brahmacharis would have to go from door to beg alms for the ashrama, and they were trained from the very beginning to address every woman as mother. Teachings of Lord Kapila, page 131. Refraining from sex enables one to be very determined and powerful. It is not necessary to do anything else. This is a secret people are not aware of. If you want to do something with determination, you have to refrain from sex. Regardless of the process, be it Hatha Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or whatever, sex indulgence is not allowed. Sex is allowed only for householders who want to beget good children and raise them in Krishna consciousness. By taking advantage and indulging in sex life, we are simply wasting our time, the path of perfection. As stated before, the determination can be attained only by one who does not indulge in sex. Celibacy makes one's determination strong. Therefore, from the very beginning, Krishna states that the yogi does not engage in sex. If one indulges in sex, one's determination will be flickering. Therefore, sex life should be controlled according to the rules and regulations governing the Grihastha ashrama, or sex should be given up altogether. Actually, it should be given up altogether, but if this is not possible, it should be controlled. Then determination will come because, after all, determination is a bodily affair. Determination means continuing to practice Krishna consciousness with patience and perseverance. If one does not immediately attain the desired results, one should not think, oh, what is this Krishna consciousness? I will give it up. No, we must have determination and faith in Krishna's words, the path of perfection. How can a person take pleasure in the enjoyment of sex life in this body which is a bag of skin and bones filled with blood and covered by a skin and flesh, and which produces mucus and evil smells. This perception is possible only for who is awakened to Krishna consciousness and who has become fully cognizant of abominable nature of the material body. The Nectar of Devotion, chapter 48. In Vedic civilization, boys were trained from the very beginning of life as first class brahmacharis. They went to the Gurukula, the school of the spiritual master, and learned self control, cleanliness, truthfulness, and many other saintly qualities. The best of them were later fit to rule the country. The Science of Self Realization, page 187. To properly execute celibacy, one should not even think or even talk of sex life. Reading modern literature and newspapers which are filled with sexual material is also against the principles of Brahmacharya. Similarly, indulging in sex in any way, looking at and whispering with girls, and determining or endeavoring to engage in sex life are all against the principles of Brahmacharya. One executes real Brahmacharya when all these activities come to a halt. Krishna Consciousness, the Matchless Gift, chapter 4. In the darkness of this material world, the only happiness is in sleep and sex. DS Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Discovery of Self, I think. Srila Prabhupada. Sex is animalistic, it is not love but lust. Sex means the mutual satisfaction of senses, and that is lust. All this lust is taking place under the name of love, and out of illusion, people may mistake this lust for love. Real love says people are suffering from a lack of Krishna consciousness. Let us do something for them so that they can understand the value of life.
DS means dialectic spiritualism. There was a book previously printed by BBT called Dialectic Spiritualism in that name, but the title is changed now. The book is the same. It is called Beyond Illusion and Doubt. That book in that.
Okay, bro.
Hare Krishna. Continue.
Ordinary men take sex to be highest pleasure. The entire material world is existing because of sex. But how long does this sex pleasure last? A few minutes only. A man who is wise does not want pleasure that lasts only a few minutes, but pleasure that continues perpetually. Nitya means eternal, and Ananda means bliss. The Vedas state that those who are intelligent are not interested in transient pleasure but in eternal pleasure. They know their constitutional position, they know they are not the body. The pleasures of the body are transient and are sought by rascals. Repression is always there. If we are diseased and the doctor advises us not to take solid food, we have to repress our appetite. In the system of Brahmacharya, the Brahmachari represses his desire for sex. This is called tapasya, voluntary repression. Of course, this is very difficult without some better engagement. Therefore, as I said, we have to replace an inferior engagement with a superior one. When you are captivated by seeing the beautiful form of Krishna, you naturally no longer desire to see the beautiful form of a young woman. Srila Prabhupada. We must understand why this sex problem is there. If we tolerate a little itching sensation, we will be spared much pain. Yan maitunadi grahamedi sukham hi tucham kanduyanena karayor iva dukha dukham. Sex life is compared to the rubbing of two hands to relieve an itch. Grahamedis, householders without spiritual knowledge, think that this itching is the greatest platform of happiness, although it is actually a source of distress. Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 9th chapter, 45th verse. When ordinary men are overly attached to materialistic life, their only happiness is sexual intercourse. The Shastras say that happiness derived from sexual intercourse is very, very insignificant. Indeed, it is not even happiness. At best, it may be considered a 10th class happiness because people have no idea of happiness of Krishna consciousness. They think that sex is the highest happiness. But if we analyze it, what kind of happiness is it? When we have an itch, we scratch it and feel some pleasure. But after the pleasure passes, the effects are abominable. The itch becomes worse. The Shastras tell us that if we just try to tolerate the itching sensation, we will be spared a great deal of pain. This is possible if we practice this Krishna consciousness. Shyamasundara Dasa. Freud believed that
Freud,
neurosis.
Freud, Freud.
Freud. Freud believed that neuroses, disorders, anxieties, and frustrations have their origin in repression. Srila Prabhupada. And I am telling you that all these are due to sex. But we are not advocating repression. We give facility in the form of a wife. The sex impulse is to be directed to the wife. Shyam Sundar Dasa. But Freud insisted that the sex impulse is present at the very beginning of life. Srila Prabhupada. We also admit that. We say that as soon as the living being is embodied, he experiences hunger and sex. Why is that? Ahara Nidra Bhaya Maituna. We find these impulses even in animals. These drives are already there. What is the use in philosophizing about them? Sham Sundaradasa. Through, through psychoanalysis, pent up emotions can be released and the original shock mitigated by remembering and confessing. Srila Prabhupada. But what guarantee is there that we will not receive another shock? The living entity is receiving shock after shock. You try to cure him of one and another comes. It is a fact that material life is painful. As soon as you receive this material body, you must suffer the threefold miseries. Everyone is seeking happiness, but unless materialistic life is stopped, unless we put an end to birth, old age, disease, and death, there is no question of happiness. Materialistic life is a disease, and Vedic civilization attempts to cure this disease. Our program is total cure, no more shock. Srila Prabhupada. Human life is meant for tapasya, for putting an end to sex. This is the process of Brahmacharya. The only happiness in this material world is considered to be sexual. Yan Maitunadi, Bhagavatam 7th Canto 9th chapter 45th verse. The word Adi means the basic principle, which in the material world is sex. What is materialistic happiness? It is enjoying this life with one's friends and family. But what kind of pleasure is this? It is compared to a drop of water in the desert. Actually, we are seeking unlimited pleasure. Ananda Mayo Vyasat. How can this drop of water in the desert, which is materialistic pleasure, ever satisfy us? No one is satisfied. Although people are having sex in so many different ways, and now young girls are almost going naked, and the female population is increasing everywhere. As soon as there is an increase in the female population, the women say, "Where are the men?" Then there must be disaster because every woman is trying to attract a man, and men will take advantage of this situation. When milk is available in the market, what is the use in keeping a cow? The more men become attached to women, the more the female population will increase. When you have more sex, your power to beget a male child is diminished. When the male is less potent, a girl is born. And when a man is more potent, a boy is born. If a man's discharge is larger, there will be a male child. If the woman's discharge is larger, there will be a female child. When women are easily available, men become weak and they beget female children because they lose their power from overindulgence. Sometimes they even become impotent. If you don't restrict your sex life, there will be so many disasters. Yamnacharya says. Uh, Prabhu, can
Yan,
you? Yeah.
yan, यदवधि मम चेत कृष्ण पदारविंदे नव नव रसधाम्नि उद्यंतं रंतुमासित तदवधि बत नारी संगमे स्मर्यमाने भवति मुख विकार सृष्टि निष्ठीवनं च.
Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. Shyamsundara Dasa. Freud would consider this a form of repression. Srila Prabhupada. His idea of repression is different from ours. Our repression means raising early in the morning, attending Mangalarti, chanting the Harekrsna Mahamantra, and engaging in devotional service. In this way, we repress material propensities. Shyama Sundara Dasa. In other words, it's repression with awareness and knowledge. Srila
Okay.
Prabhupada. Yeah.
Dabaga? Oh,
Srila
Vandana.
Prabhupada. Actual knowledge will come later. In the beginning, there is obedience to spiritual master. In this way, we will not become habituated to undesirable activity.
Okay, Prabhuji. I will request some other devotee to read.
Thank you very much. Prabhu.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Okay. Shubhankarji, you can read. Thank you. Quotes from biographical works on Srila Prabhupada.
To speak ill of sexual pleasure was certainly not a strategic move for one who wanted to create followers among the Lower East Side hippies. But Prabhupada never considered changing his message. In fact, when Umapati had mentioned that Americans didn't like to hear that sex was only for conceiving children, Prabhupada had replied, "I cannot change the philosophy to please the Americans." "What about sex?" asked the ISKCON attorney, Steve Goldsmith, one evening, speaking out from the rear of the crowded temple. "Sex should be only with one's wife," Prabhupada said, "and that is also restricted. Sex is for the propagation of Krishna-conscious children. My spiritual master used to say that to beget Krishna-conscious children, he was prepared to have sex 100 times. Of course, that is most difficult in this age. Therefore, he remained a brahmachari." "But sex is a very strong force," Mr. Goldsmith challenged. "What a man feels for a woman is undeniable. Therefore, in every culture there is the institution of marriage," Prabhupada replied. "You can get yourself married and live peacefully with one woman. But the wife should not be used as a machine for sense gratification. Sex should be restricted to once a month and only for the propagation of children." Hayagriva, who was seated just to Swamiji's left, beside the large dangling symbol, spoke out suddenly. "Only once a month," and with a touch of facetious humor, he added loudly, "Better to forget the whole thing." "Yes, that's it. Very good boy." Swamiji laughed, and others joined him. "It's best not to think of it. Best just to chant Hare Krishna." And he held up his hands and as if he were chanting on a strand of beads. "That way we will be saved from such botheration. Sex is like the itching sensation, that's all. And as we scratch, it gets worse. So we must tolerate the itching and ask Krishna to help us. It is not easy. Sex is the highest pleasure in the material world, and it is also the greatest bondage." But Steve Goldsmith was shaking his head. Prabhupada looked at him, smiling. "There is still a problem?" "It's just that, well, it's been proved dangerous to repress the sex drive. There's a theory that we have wars because people are eating meat," Prabhupada interrupted. "As long as people eat meat, there will be war. And if a man eats meat, he will be sure to have illicit sex also." Steve Goldsmith was an influential friend and supporter of ISKCON. But Prabhupada would not change the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to please the Americans. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Chapter 21. Srila Prabhupada objected to being called conservative. He was indignant. "Conservative? How is that?" "In respect to sex and drugs," Mukunda suggested. "Of course, we are conservative in that sense," Prabhupada said. "That simply means we are following Shastra. We cannot depart from Bhagavad-Gita, but conservative we are not. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so strict that he would not even look on a woman. But we are accepting everyone into this movement, regardless of sex, caste, position, or whatever. Everyone is invited to come chant Hare Krishna. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's munificence, his liberality. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita chapter 22. Upendra was still bothered by sexual desires. He thought that maybe he should get married, but he was confused about what a Krishna conscious marriage was supposed to be. How could you be married, he puzzled, if you don't love the girl you want to marry? And how could you love her without having sex with her? He wanted to ask Swamiji about this, but he kept it to himself, waiting for an opportunity and for the courage. Then one day he entered Prabhupada's room as Prabhupada paced back and forth from one end of the room, with its 3 large bay windows overlooking Frederick Street, to the other end where his rocking chair sat. Now Upendra decided he could ask his question. Swamiji, he began, may I ask a question? Yes, Srila Prabhupada replied, stopping his pacing. If a boy is separate from a girl, then how can he learn to love her? Prabhupada began to walk back and forth, again chanting on his beats. After a moment he turned and said softly, Love? Love is for Krishna. And he walked toward the window and looked down at the street below. You want a girl? Pick one. He pointed towards some women passing on the street. There is no love in this material world, he said. Love is for Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita chapter 24. Srila Prabhupada, women and men can live separately. That is also essential. Butter and fire must be kept apart. Otherwise the butter will melt. We cannot stop it. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita chapter 46. This is not the business of the Guru, said Prabhupada. How to increase sex life and family life. They are not happy, these Western men and women. They become married, but they are not happy. Therefore, I recommend Brahmacharya and Sannyasa life. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita chapter 49. Control of the senses means that I can be in the midst of beautiful women, but I will feel no desire for sex. I have got sufficient strength, but I have no desire for this. That is real control of the senses. Prabhupada Leela. Yoga student. What about sex desire? I want the spiritual, but I have such a strong desire for sex. Prabhupada. Hatha Yoga is also for controlling sex desire. If you have such desire, you are making no progress. Yoga student. How does a devotee of Krishna control sexual desire? Prabhupada. Automatically. Krishna is beautiful. We are accustomed to this habit very long time. Become sincere and Krishna will protect you. Yoga student. Sometimes I have a sex urge. Prabhupada. What? You? Everybody. In birds, beasts, demigods, the binding force is sex. The material life means sex desire. If you have a strong sex desire, pray to Krishna. Know that this is the attack of Maya. Pray and Maya will go away. You cannot fight with Maya by your own energy. Maya is presenting herself more beautiful than Krishna, but Krishna is more beautiful. Prabhupada Leela. Marriage means 75% chance you will not go back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada quoted in Servant of the Servant. Then Prabhupada proceeded to give a very powerful lecture about remaining brahmachari, telling the man, why bother to get married? When you get married, your wife will immediately say, where is the house? Where are the children? Where is the clothing? Where is the food? In this way, there will be so many problems. He said, it was better to stay simple and remain brahmachari and preach Lord Chaitanya's mission. Servant of the Servant. Prabhupada lectured on the advantages of remaining a brahmachari throughout one's life. If one could do this, it would make going back to Godhead very simple. A brahmachari need not worry where to sleep or how much to eat. He can sleep underneath a tree or even in the snow. His only concern is how to serve Krishna more and more. He does so much service that at night, when it is time for him to take rest, he falls asleep immediately, because he is free of any anxieties. Grihastha life however, is fraught with problems. As soon as one is married, there are so many responsibilities which unnecessarily increase life's problems. The wife will make demands. Where is our house? When will we have children? Where are my clothes, food? In this way, there will be so much disturbance, to no advantage. Instead, one should be intelligent and avoid this botheration altogether. Simply spend your time distributing books. Then there will be no time left for Maya to lure you. The Brahmacharis enjoyed hearing Srila Prabhupada glorify life of Brahmacharya, life of celibacy dedicated to preaching. They were already experiencing a carefree existence by avoiding the entanglement of the opposite sex. To have their spiritual master confirm their position strengthened their resolve to remain fixed in their vow. But it was not always easy. When Srila Prabhupada called for questions, one devotee asked, Srila Prabhupada, we have to approach so many women while distributing books in the parking lots. Yet we have just come from material life and are still feeling attraction. So what is the best way to preach without becoming affected? Prabhupada immediately replied, sex life is an itch. It has to be tolerated. If you become tolerant, then the itching sensation will go away. Just learn to tolerate it and concentrate more on your service. Servant of the servant. Quotes from Srila Prabhupada's letters. A brahmachari should not see any kind of naked picture. That is violation of brahmachari law. 28 to 1967. Srila Prabhupada specifies in this letter that this includes pictures of Krishna and the gopis. Krishna consciousness means to increase the number of persons in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, it is the duty of a brahmachari to go door to door as a beggar and enlighten people in Krishna consciousness. Whenever you go to some person, he will hear something from the devotee about Krishna consciousness, and that will be very much beneficial for both the devotee and the person who hears the devotee. In India, the brahmacharis are meant for begging from door to door for the spiritual master. But in your country, this activity is not allowed. Therefore, some devices like selling the publications, recruiting members, inviting them to our meetings, and likewise activities must be taken by the brahmacharis, and that will be nice. You have written to say that your wife and you have a problem on which you require my help. The whole world, beginning with the highest planet to the lowest in the material world, is facing this problem. Combination of husband and wife is a necessary satisfaction of the sex urge. The foolish people see every day this problematic situation, still they are not intelligent enough to avoid it. Training of brahmachari life is especially meant for this purpose, and a student is advised not to indulge in sex life, just to avoid these problems. It is very difficult to satisfy a woman by a person who has no good income, neither very good health. The woman as a class wants sufficient means to eat and decorate, and at the same time full satisfaction of sex. Any husband who cannot satisfy his wife by these three items, namely sufficient food, sufficient dress and ornament, and sufficient satisfaction of sex, must meet all these problems. And as soon as one becomes engaged in solving these problems, it is very difficult to make any progress in Krishna consciousness. If one is serious to make any success in the matter of Krishna consciousness, one should avoid the association of women as far as possible. Married life is a sort of license to the incapable man who cannot avoid sex life.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Shivakumar Rajendran, you can read. There's so much time left, 15 minutes we can read.
Harekrsna Prabhu. Is it audible, Prabhu?
Yeah, Prabhuji.
I thank you very much for your appreciation of my disciples in New York, and you will be glad to know all my disciples in different centers are being so trained. The four principles of restriction, namely no illicit sex relations, no animal food, no intoxication, and no gambling, are acting on their character. Character building is the groundwork for reaching Krishna consciousness, and the Vedic injunction is that one can advance in spiritual life by following the rules of austerity and celibacy. 18:168. Krishna consciousness movement is actually declaration of war against Maya. The conditioned souls who wanted to enjoy this material world are captivated by the sex desires. If one wants to get out of material existence, he must control sex desires. The whole scheme of Vedic civilization is based on this principle of controlling sex desires. There are four orders of life: Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. The majority of the orders, namely Brahmachari, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa, are forbidden sex life. Only the householders are allowed sex life. That is also restricted. That means sex life is condemned throughout because that is the cause of material bondage. Feeling of sex life in young boys and girls is quite natural, but one has to check such sex life by reason, argument, and knowledge. The married boys and girls are there in our society. Sex life is not forbidden. If Jagadananda is feeling sex urge so urgently, even at the age of 16 or 17, he must be prepared to take the responsibility of married life. I cannot allow in our society any nonsense like illicit sex life at any circumstance. Jagadananda must subdue his sex desire by chanting Hare Krishna and praying to Krishna to help him. If not, he must be prepared to marry and take the responsibility fully. Actually, the association of young boys and girls is very much disruptive for brahmachari life, but in your country it is impossible to stop free mixing of young boys and girls. So voluntarily they have to check these sex desires until they are married. If they are strong enough in Krishna consciousness, any amount of sex urge will not disturb them. Even if it disturbs, it will come and go. Krishna is Madana Mohana, or the enchanter of Cupid, and Cupid is the god of sex desire. So, if anyone wants to enchant Cupid, instead of being enchanted by Cupid, he must take shelter of the enchanter of Cupid, Sri Krishna. 21:168. I understand that you sometimes feel sex urges and frustration. In the material world, sex urge is the binding force for material existence. A determined person tolerates such sex urges as one tolerates the itching sensation of eczema. If if not, one can satisfy the sex urge by legitimate marriage. Immoral sex life and spiritual advancement are incompatible propositions. Your full engagement in Krishna consciousness and constant chanting will save you from all inconveniences. 22:168. If you want sex life, you are at liberty to get yourself married. But don't have illicit sex with some Maya's representative. That won't help you in your spiritual advancement. We don't forbid sex life, but we cannot allow illicit sex. For a young man, it is very difficult to check sex desire. Therefore, best thing is for him to get himself married and live like a responsible gentleman. Irresponsible man cannot make progress materially or spiritually. You are intelligent young man. You can understand things as we say, and you follow and you will be benefited. Mistakes we may commit because it is not out of human activity. But at the same time, you must use your good consciousness how to achieve the goal of your life, Krishna. Please stick to this chanting process sincerely without offense, and everything will be all right with you. 12 to 68. If we can make sex life nil, we are 50% liberated. 15 to 68. It does not matter whether one is a brahmachari or a householder. The real test is how he is executing Krishna consciousness. 4:768. Regarding your enemy, Mr. Lust, We should always remember that Krishna is stronger than any demon and Mr. Lust or his father or grandfather. Nobody can do anything provided we take shelter of Krishna tightly. But the proposal that marriage will solve the problem of lust is not practical. Neither wife, neither wife should be accepted as machine for satisfying our lust. The marriage tie should be taken as sacred. One who marries for subduing lust is mistaken, because lust cannot be satisfied simply by engaging in sense gratification. It is compared with extinguishing fire with a large amount of petrol. For the time being, the fire may appear to be extinguished by pouring a large quantity of petrol, but the petrol itself is so dangerous that at any time it can be in flame. So, to subdue lust is a difficult process. Then you have to take to deity worship. So, apart from the marriage proposal, you may immediately take to deity worship. I am sure this process, helped by your regular chanting, will kill Mr. Lust, rest assured. 7:10:68. Unless our brahmacharis are very adamant to remain as brahmachari, I shall recommend everyone to marry. But if one can live as brahmachari, that is better. 16:10:68. The deity worship must be continued by everyone. Another way of success is that when one is very much sexually disturbed, he should think of Lord Krishna's pastime with the gopis and he will forget his sex urge. To think of Krishna's pastimes with the gopis but not try to imitate. 8:11:68. You write to say that you are having trouble with sex agitation. Why you do not marry then? Either you become grahastha, or what choice is there? Either you train yourself and pray to Krishna, begging that you remain brahmachari, or else get yourself married. 2:12:68. I always recommend that one should remain brahmachari if possible. 24:1:69. I am pleased by your wish to remain as a brahmachari, and if you stick to your decision, you will be able to go back to Godhead, back to home, in this very life, without waiting for another birth. Please try in every way to stick to this principle and simply engage yourself in Krishna's service. That will protect you from any attack of Maya. Maya can take Krishna's place in our heart as soon as there is a slackness on our part. Otherwise, if Krishna is seated always, Maya has no opportunity to occupy the seat. Try to follow this method and you will surely be successful. 1:2:69. As far as your occasional agitation from Maya, the answer is very simple, that one must either strictly control his senses or else he must get himself married. If one is strong enough in Krishna consciousness, then there is no reason to become Grihastha. But if one is still disturbed by sex desire, then marriage is the only other possibility. But if one is still Brahmachari, then
Signal got cut. As far as your occasional agitation from Maya, the answer is very simple, that one must either strictly control his senses or else he must get himself married. If one is strong enough in Krishna consciousness, then there is no reason to become Grihastha. But if one is still disturbed by sex desire, then marriage is the only other possibility. But if one is still brahmachari, then he must be sure to follow all the rules and regulations very strictly. There is no place in spiritual life for cheating in this manner. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has never criticized a householder for having sex life for the purpose of bearing children. But when it came to Junior Haridas, who was posing as a sannyasi but was still engaged in lustful thoughts, Lord Chaitanya would not tolerate, and Junior Haridas was banished in the association of the Lord. So this is very important that we remain very firm in our home of Brahmacharya. Or if this is very difficult, then householder life is the next satisfactory solution. 8 to 1969. It's very nice that you are wishing to remain as a brahmachari. Actually, it doesn't mean that. Actually, it doesn't matter one is householder or brahmachari. Sincerity of purpose is the only qualification. Sincerity of purpose is the only qualification of Krishna consciousness. Sri Narottama Das Thakur says that he hankers after the company of any person. Never mind whether he is in the renounced order of life or in householder life, just as long as he is merged into the ocean of Krishna consciousness. That is the one qualification. 13-1969. To become agitated is not very unusual thing, but to control it, that is real thing. Sex life is not sense gratification. Unlawful sex is sense gratification. As far as your decision to remain a brahmachari is very good, but if you follow the rules and regulations and chant regularly and pray to Lord Brahma and Chaitanya, surely he will give you the necessary strength, and if you can continue as brahmachari, then you avoid so much botherations of worldly life. 21st May 1969. Okay, we will stop here and we'll continue from tomorrow from page number 203. A brahmachari has nothing to do except serve his spiritual master. So if you have any doubt, we can answer. Otherwise, we are closing here. Okay, we'll close here. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। दन्ते निधाय तृणकं पदयोर्निपत्य कृत्वा च काकुशतम् एतदहं ब्रह्मि साधवे सकलमेव व्यायतिरां चैतन्यचन्द्रचरणे गुरुदा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.